There exists among us a rare breed of women who carry an intelligence that cannot be measured by conventional standards, an invisible wisdom that flows like underground rivers through the landscape of human consciousness. You know her when you meet her, though you might not understand why her presence shifts something deep within your chest, why her silence speaks louder than 1,000 words. This hidden form of intelligence has fascinated depth psychologists for generations, particularly Carl Jung, who recognized that certain women possess what he called a superior feeling function, a psychological capacity that transcends ordinary emotional sensitivity. These women don't simply feel more. They perceive through dimensions that remain invisible to most. They read the energetic signatures of souls, decode the symbolic language of the unconscious, and navigate reality through channels that science has yet to map. What you're about to discover will illuminate 6 traits that distinguish these spiritually intelligent women from those who merely perform spirituality or mistake emotional reactivity for authentic insight. These characteristics operate in the shadows of consciousness, often misunderstood by a world that values the quantifiable over the mystical. Yet for those who possess them, these traits represent both a gift and a burden, a calling that demands they walk between worlds while remaining grounded in this one. The first invisible trait reveals itself through their uncanny ability to read energies that others cannot perceive. When she enters a room, something shifts. The atmosphere changes, not because of what she does or says, but because of what she emanates. Jung understood this phenomenon through his concept of the feeling function when developed to its highest expression. Unlike sentimentalism or emotional reactivity, this superior feeling operates as a finely tuned instrument that detects the subtle vibrations of authenticity, deception, pain, and joy that radiate from every human encounter. These women function as living barometers of the human condition. They sense the unspoken tensions between couples at dinner parties, feel the repressed grief of the cheerful neighbor, and detect the hidden agenda behind the charming facade. This isn't paranoia or projection, it's pattern recognition operating at frequencies most people cannot access. Their nervous systems have been calibrated through years of hypervigilance, trauma, or simple genetic inheritance to pick up signals that others miss entirely. The ancestral component cannot be ignored. These women often carry the energetic legacy of grandmothers and great-grandmothers who developed this radar out of necessity. Women who had to read the emotional climate of their households to ensure survival, who learned to detect danger in a husband's footstep or opportunity in a neighbor's glance. This inherited wisdom flows through bloodlines like a river of knowing, surfacing in daughters who find themselves overwhelmed in crowds, exhausted after social gatherings, or strangely certain about people they've just met. Yet this gift comes wrapped in thorns. To see clearly is to see what others prefer to keep hidden. To feel authentically is to recognize performance and pretense everywhere. These women often find themselves isolated, not by choice, but by the sheer intensity of their perceptual accuracy. They become mirrors that reflect back truths people aren't ready to face, oracles speaking languages that sound like judgment to those still sleeping in their illusions. Have you ever walked into a space and immediately known something was wrong, even though everyone seemed perfectly fine? Have you ever felt an instant aversion to someone that later proved justified, though you couldn't explain your initial reaction? This is the first glimpse into the realm of energetic literacy, a skill that transforms these women into unwitting guardians of emotional truth. The second trait emerges through their intimate relationship with what Jung called the collective unconscious, that vast reservoir of archetypal patterns and universal symbols that shapes human experience across cultures and centuries. While most people catch occasional glimpses of this deeper reality through dreams or moments of inspiration, spiritually intelligent women maintain open channels to this wellspring of wisdom. They dream in symbols that later manifest in waking life, experience synchronicities with a frequency that defies statistical probability, and receive guidance through intuitive flashes that prove remarkably accurate. Jung observed that certain individuals possess what he termed a more permeable ego boundary, allowing them to access collective wisdom without losing their individual identity. These women embody this rare capacity. They serve as translators between the symbolic realm and practical reality, taking the abstract language of the unconscious and rendering it into actionable insight. A dream about water becomes guidance about emotional healing. A chance encounter with a specific animal becomes a message about personal power. A recurring number pattern becomes confirmation of being on the right path. This connection to the collective unconscious amplifies their experience of meaningful coincidences. While others dismiss such events as random chance, these women recognize them as communications from the deeper intelligence that orchestrates reality behind the scenes. They learn to trust these synchronistic guideposts, allowing them to navigate life with a sense of flow and timing that appears magical to observers, but feels perfectly natural to them. They understand that the universe speaks in whispers and symbols, and they've developed the inner ears to listen. The phenomenon extends beyond personal guidance into collective service. These women often find themselves in the right place at the right time to offer exactly what someone needs, not through planning but through following invisible currents of meaning. They become bridges between the material and spiritual dimensions, translating universal wisdom into human understanding through their presence, their words, and their very being. Their lives become stories of mythic proportions, filled with encounters that feel scripted by some benevolent cosmic intelligence. This leads naturally to their third characteristic, one that often puzzles those around them. These spiritually intelligent women cultivate what Jung called sacred solitude, choosing isolation not from misanthropy, but from wisdom. They understand something that extroverted cultures struggle to accept, that the deepest transformations happen in silence, away from the opinions and energies of others. Their solitude isn't loneliness, it's laboratory work for the soul. Jung's concept of individualization requires periods of withdrawal from collective influences to discover one's authentic self. These women instinctively honor this process, creating space for their inner voice to emerge above the noise of social expectations. They distinguish between solitude that heals and isolation that wounds, choosing the former as a conscious practice rather than accepting the latter as a punishment. When they withdraw, they're not running from life, they're diving deeper into it. The sacred nature of their solitude becomes apparent in how they use this time. Rather than numbing themselves with distractions, they engage in practices that enhance their connection to inner wisdom. They journal, meditate, create, or simply sit in silence, allowing the sediment of daily experience to settle so that clarity can emerge. These periods of withdrawal become times of intense creativity and spiritual communication, when insights download and perspectives shift in ways that transform their entire understanding of existence. Yet this natural rhythm of withdrawal and engagement often confuses family members and friends who interpret their need for space as rejection or depression. These women must learn to honor their energetic cycles without guilt, understanding that their depth requires regular returns to the inner well. They discover that attempting to maintain constant social connection depletes their spiritual resources and diminishes their ability to serve others authentically. Their solitude becomes an act of self-preservation that ultimately benefits everyone in their orbit. The fourth trait reveals perhaps the most profound aspect of their spiritual intelligence, their capacity to transform personal suffering into universal wisdom through what Jung called the transcendent function. These women don't simply endure pain, they alchemize it. They descend voluntarily into their own underworld, facing the demons that others spend lifetimes avoiding, and emerge carrying treasures that can only be found in the depths of personal hell. This process mirrors the ancient archetype of the wounded healer, the one who gains the power to heal others precisely through intimate knowledge of suffering. Jung recognized this pattern in many of his patients, particularly women who had endured significant trauma or loss. Rather than remaining victims of their circumstances, they transformed their wounds into sources of compassion and insight that could serve the collective healing process. Their pain became their qualification, their suffering their certification as guides for others walking similar paths. The transcendent function operates by holding opposites in tension until a third possibility emerges. These women learn to embrace both their light and shadow, their joy and grief, their strength and vulnerability. Instead of choosing sides in the war between opposing forces within themselves, they become the sacred marriage of these opposites, giving birth to a new level of consciousness that transcends the original conflict. Their integrated wholeness becomes a beacon for others still struggling with inner fragmentation. This alchemical process requires tremendous courage and commitment to truth over comfort. These women must be willing to feel everything fully, to resist the temptation to spiritual bypass their pain through premature forgiveness or positive thinking. They learn that healing isn't the absence of wounds, but the transformation of wounds into wisdom. Their scars become sacred sites, pilgrimage destinations for their own souls, and eventually for others seeking similar transformation. The responsibility that comes with this wisdom cannot be understated. Once you've transformed lead into gold, once you've walked through fire and emerged refined rather than destroyed, you become accountable to the collective healing process. These women often find themselves drawn to serve as counselors, teachers, artists, or healers, using their transmuted pain as medicine for a wounded world. Their fifth characteristic manifests as a profound mastery of nonverbal communication, what Jung referred to as therapeutic presence. These women have learned to communicate through the quality of their being rather than the quantity of their words. They understand that silence can be more eloquent than speech, that presence can be more healing than advice, and that sometimes the deepest service they can offer is simply to witness another's experience without trying to fix, change, or improve it. This communication through presence operates on energetic frequencies that bypass the rational mind and speak directly to the soul. When they enter a space of suffering, their very being becomes a reminder that it's possible to survive the unsurvivable, to find meaning in meaninglessness, to discover light within darkness. They don't need to share their stories or offer platitudes. Their existence itself becomes proof that transformation is possible. Their relationship with language reflects this deeper understanding. When they do speak, their words carry weight and precision. They've learned that speech is a sacred act, that words have the power to create and destroy, to heal and wound. They choose their expressions carefully, preferring quality over quantity, depth over breadth. Their silence isn't emptiness, but fullness, pregnant with understanding and compassion. This economy of expression extends to their entire energetic output. They've learned to conserve their spiritual resources, understanding that their sensitivity requires careful management of where and how they invest their attention. They can afford to be generous with their presence because they've mastered the art of energetic boundaries, knowing when to open and when to close, when to give and when to preserve. People often comment on feeling better simply from being in their company, even during brief encounters. This isn't coincidence, but the natural result of their energetic sophistication. They've become tuning forks for higher frequencies, helping others remember their own capacity for peace, clarity, and wholeness through unconscious resonance rather than conscious effort. The sixth and final trait appears as their natural magnetism for sacred encounters and meaningful coincidences. These women don't actively seek spiritual experiences, they attract them. Their consciousness operates like a beacon for the mystical, drawing to themselves the people, situations, and opportunities that serve their soul's evolution and their service to the collective awakening process. What others search for, desperately, they receive as natural gifts. Jung called this phenomenon synchronicity attraction, noting that certain individuals seem to live in a reality where meaningful coincidences cluster around them like iron filings around a magnet. These women embody this principle, not through manipulation or spiritual materialism, but through authentic alignment with their deepest truth. Their lives become textbooks of synchronicity, filled with encounters that feel orchestrated by invisible intelligence. This magnetism operates through what Jung termed autonomous complexes, psychological patterns that function independently of conscious will. In most people, these complexes create problems through projection and unconscious reactivity. In spiritually intelligent women, these same mechanisms become refined instruments for attracting experiences that serve their highest good. Their psyches become antennae tuned to frequencies of meaning and purpose. The responsibility inherent in this gift requires significant discernment. Not everything that appears meaningful should be welcomed. Not every synchronicity should be followed. Not every attractive opportunity serves authentic growth. These women must develop sophisticated filters, learning to distinguish between genuine guidance and ego inflation, between divine timing and wishful thinking, between sacred encounters and spiritual inflation. Their presence in groups often catalyzes transformation in others, even when they're trying to remain invisible. They become unwitting initiators, their very existence challenging others to question their assumptions, examine their motivations, and consider possibilities beyond conventional thinking. This catalytic function happens automatically, through energetic transmission rather than conscious intention. As these women mature into their gifts, they often experience what might seem like a paradox. The more spiritually intelligent they become, the more ordinary they appear. The extraordinary becomes so natural that it loses its dramatic quality. They stop feeling special for possessing these traits and begin to understand them as tools for service rather than sources of identity. They learn to wear their wisdom lightly, carrying their insights without the weight of importance. This evolutionary process leads to what Jung called the return to simplicity, but at a higher level. Having traversed the complex territories of spiritual development, having faced their shadows and integrated their light, having learned to navigate both material and mystical dimensions, they arrive at a place of profound ordinariness. Their power operates through subtlety rather than display, through being rather than doing, through presence rather than performance. The world may never recognize their contribution, and increasingly, they find they don't need it to. Their validation comes from within, from the quiet knowing that they're fulfilling their purpose by simply being authentically themselves. They understand that their greatest service might be invisible, that their influence might be unmeasurable, that their legacy might be written in the hearts and souls of people whose lives they've touched without ever knowing the extent of their impact. This journey toward invisible influence represents the ultimate expression of spiritual intelligence. It's the recognition that true power operates through love rather than force, through inspiration rather than manipulation, through example rather than instruction. These women become living prayers, walking meditations, embodied reminders that it's possible to live with depth, authenticity, and grace in a world that often values superficiality, performance, and aggression. The solitude that once felt like exile becomes their sanctuary. The sensitivity that once felt like a curse becomes their superpower. The invisible wisdom that once made them feel alien becomes their greatest gift to a world hungry for authentic spiritual guidance. They learn to trust the intelligence that flows through them, to honor the gifts that set them apart, and to embrace the calling that might always remain partially mysterious even to themselves. If you've recognized, know that you're part of an ancient lineage as bridges. Your sensitivity isn't a weakness but a strength. Your need for solitude isn't your ability to transform pain into wisdom isn't common, invaluable. Your invisible intelligence isn't imagined, but absolutely real and desperately needed. The path of the spiritually intelligent woman isn't always easy, but it's always meaningful. It requires courage to trust what others cannot see, faith to follow guidance that might not make logical sense, and strength to remain authentic in a world that often rewards conformity. Yet for those called to walk this path, there's no real alternative. The intelligence that flows through them isn't optional, but essential, not chosen but given, not earned but inherited. Your journey continues with each breath, each choice, each moment of presence you offer to a world in desperate need of the medicine you carry. The invisible traits that make you who you are aren't coincidences, but callings, not accidents but assignments from the deeper intelligence that orchestrates all existence. Trust the wisdom that flows through you. Honor the sensitivity that sets you apart. Embrace the solitude that restores you. Transform the pain that teaches you. Communicate through the silence that speaks. Attract the sacred that serves you. If this resonates with your soul's knowing, if these words have touched something deep within your being, take a moment to reflect on your own journey of spiritual intelligence. Share in the comments below which of these traits you recognize most strongly in yourself, and how they've shaped your path of awakening. Your story matters. Your experience validates others, and your willingness to be seen encourages women everywhere to embrace their own invisible gifts. Consider subscribing to continue this exploration of feminine spiritual wisdom through the lens of depth, psychology, and Jungian insight. There are more hidden aspects of the feminine soul waiting to be illuminated, more invisible gifts waiting to be celebrated, and more women ready to recognize the profound intelligence they carry within their very being. The conversation continues, the journey deepens, and the healing spreads through every woman brave enough to claim her place in this ancient lineage of spiritual knowing.